Well, here we are on the first Sunday of Lent, and we hear a couple of very familiar stories. We hear the story of Adam and Eve in the garden and their temptation by the serpent, and we hear Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. And in the past, I've talked about the different temptations and what they all represented to us, but I found myself wondering, well, what's at the heart of a temptation? What's at the heart of, what's the common thread between the two temptations that we heard about, and how do they relate to us in our lives? And I found myself, interested in the fact that, first of all, that the temptation was intended by God in the case of Jesus, that the Spirit was led into the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted. So it was God wanted it in the first place. So I also found myself wondering if temptations were a good thing, or that what they could possibly do for us. And so let me back up and look at what the common thread seems to be between the two temptations. And we see in the story of Adam and Eve that that Eve initially was tempted by the serpent, because the serpent says, "You will not die if you eat from the fruit of the knowledge of good, fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." That's a mouthful. You will not die. God knows that you will be like him if you eat from this tree. So the temptation in there, as I saw it, was that somehow Satan was saying to Eve, God is holding something back from you. God is deceiving you. You're not going to die. God lied about that. You're not going to die. Your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God. So the first temptation seems to be the first temptation of humanity, if we want to take the story literally, is that God is holding something back from us, that there's more that we could have. We could have wisdom. We could have knowledge of good and evil. Although, how would they know what that is? But there was something that more that they could have. And it made me wonder, what makes us susceptible to a temptation, first of all. We talk about the devil, and we talk about Satan, and I don't want to dismiss the idea of Satan lightly, although I am a little suspicious of people who use as a cop-out, well, the devil made me do it. Remember Flip Wilson? The devil made me do it. I was tempted by Satan one more time. It's all Satan's fault. Not my fault for giving in, or it's not my responsibility to be aware of my temptations and ask for help. But the devil made me do it. And so I thought, well, the only reason we give in to temptation in the first place is because there's some part of us that's susceptible to whatever that temptation is. And I wondered what that was. And I wonder, again, this is all speculation, but it's my theory, and I get to stand up here and tell you. Talk about a bully pulpit, right? What is it about human beings that make us susceptible to so many of the temptations that we get assaulted with? And I wondered if God had not created us, hardwired in us, a desire for more. And so that way it's God's fault, right? Yeah. I better be careful here, because we don't want to lose any more parts of our building. But the desire for more can be a good thing in some ways. It makes us want to continue to improve things in our lives. It makes us continue to strive for better conditions for ourselves and for our loved ones. It makes us create art and beauty, and it makes us, want to, be better athletes. And, there are a lot of good things that come out of that desire. But the flip side of it is that it can make us greedy and envious and suspicious of others who are trying to get what we want, right? And so here is the very first suspicion that happens is, wait a minute, God didn't tell me the whole truth? God is somehow holding something back from me that I could have, that I should have? And what I think it is it's a distortion of perception. It's a distortion that there's something more that I should have, and if I do this, then I'll get it. Okay, so it's a distortion of perception that's at the heart of temptation, and think about it. I mean, think about some of the problems of the world just currently. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the conflict in Syria, the conflict between our president and Congress, and their back and forth, and the inability to get anything done. It's all, grounded in a distortion of perception, that somebody else either has something I want and I want to get it, or there's something I have that somebody else is trying to get, whether it's power or land, or that is mine, and they can't have it. And so it all boils down to the distortion. Now, anybody outside of the system can see that whatever perception is not true. We can see that, wait a minute, in Syria, if they would just sit down and listen to each other, they could work that conflict out. But for them, they're so ground into it, and it's so wired in for so many centuries, whatever the conflict is. And for every one of us, when we're in that distortion, we can't see it. Which is why we need community, and why we need to talk to people that disagree with us sometimes. Why we need good friends in our lives who say, now wait a minute, the way I see it is this, and to offer the possibility that maybe I'm wrong about this. But that's another sermon. But so we have this distortion that created that first temptation, and that first temptation was, to be like God, to no longer trust God and rely on ourselves, to go for whatever it is that's going to make me like God. Now, most of us don't consciously think, I want to be like God. Most of us don't consciously go after the things that we're tempted by. But what we do is say, I really shouldn't rely on God here. God could let me down. I mean, God could fail me just when I most need God. So instead, I'm going to go for this. Instead, I'm going to take charge, and I'm going to run my own life, and I'm going to do this thing, and then the temptation then is for more power and the more feeling good, feeling better, for more fun, for more. Usually, it's a more self-esteem or more praise. Those kinds of things are the real temptations that we face. So I got to tell you one of my temptations that right here that happened, and I got writing this sermon, and I found myself. I finished writing it, and then a voice told me, just do this sermon from what you remember. Tell the sermon and trust that you'll be given the words you need instead of reading it to the people. And I've had some feedback that people say, well, it's better when you don't read it to us. For me, that was a real good example of what I'm trying to say in the sermon. That I don't want to trust God. I want to sound good. I want people to be impressed by all these ideas that I've come up with. And I can't do that unless I read this, the very carefully constructed thing that an argument. And I was even thinking a couple of you specifically that I was, gearing this toward to impress, and so I'm doing it. I'm relying on God here, and that's the flip side of the temptation. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, wait a minute, what is she talking about? This doesn't have anything to do with temptations. Temptations are those that devil and that angel that sit on our shoulders and say, yes, eat chocolate during Lent, even if you did give it up, right? Or, from Animal House. Remember the scene? I shouldn't describe it, though. But those are really. But there were theologians for many centuries who have used examples like that, as though there are these two conflicting sides of us, or another way it's often put is my will, God's will. My will, God's will. My will makes me feel good. It's fun. It's what I would rather do. And then God's will, which is boring, healthy. Staying to the diet, doing the thing I don't really want to do, and it gets, split up in that way. But the real truth of it is that most of our temptations are a lot less conscious and a lot less obvious. Where our temptations are more and often boil down to, I'm going to do it my way because I want to get this, whatever, this esteem, I'm going to impress these people. I want to get that job because it's going to give me more money and more power, even though I might be violating some of my values to get it. All right? So the temptation isn't the job so much as it's, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to, and God's will, may sound good, but it's not practical in the world. It's not so practical. All that stuff they talk about on Sundays sounds nice, but, and when you go back into the real world, where it's dog eat dog, and, you got to fight for what you're going to get. You got to go back to the rules of the world. And as people of faith, we need to be better than that. We need to show what we really believe. And that's why people are fed up with church a lot of times. That's why it's like, well, those Christians don't really practice what they say they believe, So let's try to be better than that. Let's try to, actually, be aware of our temptations. Be aware of that moment when we want to begin to rely on ourselves instead of on God. Be aware of that, and then gradually, as we become more aware, then we can start asking for help before it happens. The truth about Jesus and Jesus's temptations, which I knew you probably were wondering if I was going to get back to that. The truth about Jesus is that he was so fully reliant on God. I mean, it was just part of who he was. I mean, he was God too, but the fact that he was fully human, that fully human side of him relied on God. That fully human side of him had the same temptations. I mean, he was taunted by the devil. And I tried not to read it too obviously, but if you're really the Son of God, then then turn that stone into bread. Feed yourself. You're hungry. Turn that. And the temptation was to doubt who he was, and to think, well, maybe God's not going to be there for me when I actually, really need God. So it's better for me to go ahead and feed myself now. But we know what happened when he refused to give in to the temptation. He was fed. He was ministered to by the angels. Which brings me to what happens ultimately when we don't give in to the temptations, to rely solely on ourselves. When we don't believe the lie that God is not going to take care of us, that God is going to let us down. When we don't believe that distortion of perception that, wait a minute, I don't have everything, God's holding back something that I've got to get for myself. And when we don't believe that, and we rely fully on God, is that we are given everything we need. I know that sounds awfully simplistic. It sounds way too simple to be true. But as we say in AA, it might be simple, but it's not easy. It's hard work to have faith, which is why we need the temptations. And that was my first point. The whole reason Jesus was driven into the wilderness was that God knew that he was going to need those temptations to build up his spiritual muscles, that he was going to need them to prepare him for his ministry and the attack of the Pharisees and all the slow-witted people that he was going to have to deal with, all the thick-headed people that just didn't get it over and over again, his very disciples, and that Jesus was going to need that reassurance of having having been tested and having passed the test. Now, I don't believe God tests us with bad things. A lot of people will call, like if they have a really bad illness in their family or themselves, they'll call that the trial, as though that God was testing their faith. I don't believe God does that. But I do believe that sometimes when we're in a spiritual wilderness, that God is giving us an opportunity to build our faith. When we're in those times of doubt and faith, questioning our faith. And so Jesus, was able to say, I know I'm the Son of God, so I don't have to prove it to you. I know I'm the Son of God, and I can make it, and I can rely on God and trust God, and I will be given everything I need. I want to end with a prayer, a poem prayer, kind of that was written by Jan Richardson in the book In Wisdom's Path. I have my sermon here too, just in case I had to, go reach out here. It says, I am not asking you to take this wilderness from me, to remove this place of starkness where I come to know the wildness within me, where I learn to call the names of the ravenous beasts that pace inside me, to finger the brambles that snake through my veins, to taste the thirst that tugs at my tongue. But send me tough angels, sweet wine, strong bread, just enough. Amen.